Welcome back to Sleeping with Facts, the quiet corner of the internet where history is told slowly, softly, and without any rush at all. Tonight we are stepping behind the velvet ropes of the great American mansions of the Gilded Age, not to look at the marble staircases or the chandeliers, but to follow the quiet footsteps of the men and women who kept those grand houses breathing. Let your body sink into the mattress, let your eyes grow heavy, and let this be the last thing you hear before the world fades into rest. There is nothing to remember here, nothing to solve, only a long and gentle walk through candlelit hallways and warm kitchens, told at the pace of a settling house at midnight. Somewhere beneath the polished floors of a great house on Fifth Avenue, long before the family upstairs has opened their eyes, a small bell on a numbered board begins to tremble, and a young woman in a plain gray dress rises from a narrow bed to answer it. Because in the world we are about to enter, the day always begins in the dark, 3 floors below where anyone with a title or a fortune is still sleeping soundly. Tonight, we are not going to look at the grand staircases or the ballroom ceilings that most documentaries linger on, because those rooms, however beautiful, were only ever the visible half of these houses. Instead, we are going to follow the invisible half, the corridors behind the walls, the narrow back stairs built specifically so that a maid could carry a coal scuttle from one floor to another without ever being seen by the people she served, and the vast basement kitchens where a small army of cooks, scullery maids, and kitchen boys turned raw ingredients into 11-course dinners on ranges so large they required their own dedicated staff simply to keep the coal fires burning at the correct, steady temperature. By the time this documentary is finished, you will understand how a household of 50 or 60 people could function around a single family of 4, how a butler could know, simply by the placement of a fork, that a housemaid had disturbed a table setting, and how an entire hierarchy existed below stairs that mirrored, in miniature, the very society upstairs that these men and women were never permitted to join at the dinner table. You will learn the exact architecture of a servant's wing, the specific weight of a laundry iron heated on a coal stove, the numbered bell systems that connected every room in the house to the servants' hall, and the quiet, practiced choreography that allowed a footman to enter a drawing room, refill a glass, and disappear again without a single word being exchanged. We will walk together through 11 chapters tonight, moving slowly from the moment a young person first entered service, through the ranks of butlers and housekeepers, into the great kitchens and laundries, up through the architecture of the servants' quarters themselves, and finally into the quiet, ordinary rhythms of a single working day, told in long, unhurried detail, the way a grandmother might describe a house she once worked in many decades ago. There is no need to hold on to any of this. There is no quiz at the end, no plot to follow, nothing that requires your attention to stay sharp. You are welcome to let your mind drift in and out of these details as your body settles more deeply into the bed beneath you, because the true purpose of this journey is not to keep you awake to learn, but to give your thoughts somewhere gentle and interesting to rest until sleep arrives on its own. So let the numbered bells begin to ring softly in the basement of your imagination. Let the copper pots on the kitchen wall catch the low light of a single gas lamp, and let us begin, slowly, with the very structure of the household itself. In the largest Gilded Age households, the domestic staff could number anywhere from 20 to over 80 individuals, depending on the size of the mansion and the social ambitions of the family who owned it. A townhouse on Fifth Avenue might employ around 15 to 25 servants, while a summer cottage in Newport, Rhode Island, built with 60 or 70 rooms, often required a staff nearly as large as a small hotel. This staff was organized into clearly ranked departments, each with its own chain of command, its own uniforms, and its own set of unspoken rules. The family upstairs rarely knew the names of every person keeping their household running, though the senior staff knew every detail of the family's private habits. The household staff was traditionally divided into two broad categories, known as the upper servants and the lower servants, and this division shaped nearly every aspect of daily life below stairs. Upper servants included the butler, the housekeeper, the valet, the lady's maid, and sometimes the cook, and these individuals were permitted certain privileges, such as private sitting rooms and the right to be addressed with a formal title. Lower servants, including footmen, housemaids, kitchen maids, and hall boys, occupied a rung beneath them and were expected to defer to the upper servants much as the upper servants deferred to the family. This internal hierarchy was taken extremely seriously, with its own seating arrangements at meals and its own order of precedence when entering a room. At the very top of the household pyramid stood the butler for male staff and the housekeeper for female staff, and together these two figures effectively managed the entire domestic operation on behalf of the family. The butler oversaw the male staff, the wine cellar, the silver, and the formal service of meals, while the housekeeper was responsible for the female staff, the household linens, and the general cleanliness and order of every room in the house. Both positions required years of prior experience in smaller households before a person could be trusted with the operation of a mansion of this scale. Their authority was so complete that even senior family members would often direct household requests through them rather than speaking to junior staff directly. Beneath the butler in the male hierarchy sat the valet, who attended to the personal needs of the master of the house, followed by the footman, who handled formal service, carriage duties, and heavier household tasks. Beneath the housekeeper in the female hierarchy sat the lady's maid, who attended to the mistress of the house, followed by housemaids, who cleaned and maintained the family's private rooms. Further down still were the kitchen staff, laundry staff, and the youngest, most junior workers, such as hall boys and scullery maids, who performed the most physically demanding labor in the household. Movement upward through these ranks could take a decade or more, and it typically required moving between several different households to gain the necessary experience. The size and composition of a household staff was considered a visible marker of social standing among Gilded Age families, and the number of footmen a family employed was often discussed almost as openly as the size of their fortune. A family might employ a single footman for modest entertaining, or as many as 6 or 8 footmen for large formal dinners and receptions. Footmen were sometimes selected partly for their height and general appearance, as matched pairs of footmen standing at equal height on either side of a doorway were considered a mark of elegance. This attention to visual symmetry extended to livery colors, which were carefully chosen to complement the family's own household colors or crest. Many Gilded Age households also maintained an entirely separate outdoor staff, distinct from the indoor domestic workers, including coachmen, grooms, gardeners, and later, chauffeurs, once automobiles began to replace horse-drawn carriages around the turn of the century. A large estate might employ a head gardener overseeing a team of under-gardeners responsible for greenhouses, formal flower beds, and kitchen vegetable gardens. Stable staff cared for the family's horses and carriages, often living in quarters above the carriage house itself, separate from the main servants' wing. This outdoor staff operated almost as its own small department, with its own hierarchy and its own head who reported directly to the family or the estate manager. Country estates during this period sometimes required an entirely different administrative role known as the estate steward or land agent, who managed the farms, forests, and tenant properties attached to a large rural estate, separate from the household staff who managed the mansion itself. This individual often held a position of considerable independence, working more closely with the family's business affairs than with the day-to-day rhythms of the house. Large estates in this era, particularly those modeled after English country houses, could span thousands of acres, requiring a workforce of farmhands, foresters, and labourers who rarely set foot inside the main house at all. The steward's office was typically located in a separate building on the property, reflecting the fact that estate management was considered a distinct profession from domestic service. The scale of these households meant that many mansions functioned less like private homes and more like small, self-contained institutions, complete with their own laundries, bakeries, ice houses, and sometimes even their own small dairies or greenhouses supplying fresh produce year-round. The Biltmore estate in North Carolina, for example, was designed with an extensive service wing containing a kitchen, pastry kitchen, rotisserie kitchen, pantry, and laundry, all connected by service corridors that allowed staff to move efficiently between departments. These internal systems meant that a well-run great house could operate almost entirely independent of outside deliveries for much of the year. The complexity of these operations required careful scheduling and communication among department heads, much like running a small business. Record keeping was an essential part of managing such a large staff, and housekeepers in particular were expected to maintain detailed ledgers tracking household linens, china, silver, and supplies, often noting the exact count of items down to individual napkins or teaspoons. These household account books served both practical and protective purposes, allowing the housekeeper to identify when items had gone missing or required replacement, and providing the family with an ongoing record of household expenses. Some surviving household ledgers from this period show meticulous entries recorded daily, in careful handwriting, listing everything from candle usage to the quantity of coal delivered each week. This kind of documentation reflected the broader Gilded Age fascination with order, precision, and visible efficiency. Despite this rigid structure, the household staff of a great Gilded Age mansion functioned as a genuine community with its own internal culture, its own slang, its own friendships, and its own quiet rivalries between departments. Servants often referred to their below-stairs world using a distinct vocabulary, such as calling the servants' dining area the hall and referring to senior staff by title rather than name. Many lifelong friendships and even marriages formed among staff members who lived and worked together for years within the same household. This social world below stairs, largely invisible to the family upstairs, gave structure and meaning to the daily lives of the men and women who kept these great houses running. Most domestic servants during the Gilded Age began their careers in their early teenage years, often starting as a scullery maid, hall boy, or kitchen maid, the most junior positions within the household hierarchy. Young people entering service for the first time typically came from working-class or immigrant families, and domestic service offered a stable income along with room and board, which was considered a meaningful improvement over many other forms of available labor. A new servant would usually begin in the household of a smaller, less demanding family before working their way toward employment in a grander establishment. This gradual progression allowed young workers to build both skill and reputation over time. Employment agencies, often called registry offices, played a central role in connecting prospective servants with household-seeking staff, particularly in large cities such as New York, Boston, and Chicago. These agencies maintained detailed records of applicants' skills, previous employers, and character references, and families seeking staff would visit or write to these offices to request candidates matching specific requirements. Some registry offices specialized in particular types of staff, such as agencies that focused exclusively on placing cooks or ladies' maids with experience in fine households. The system functioned somewhat like a modern employment bureau, though with a much greater emphasis on personal character and social references than formal qualifications. Character references, often simply called characters, were considered essential documents in the hiring of domestic staff, and a servant without a satisfactory reference from a previous employer would find it extremely difficult to secure a new position. These written references typically described the servant's honesty, work ethic, sobriety, and general demeanor, and prospective employers placed enormous weight on the wording used within them. Housekeepers and butlers, being responsible for hiring junior staff, often corresponded directly with previous employers to verify a candidate's character before extending an offer. This system created a strong incentive for servants to maintain a spotless reputation throughout their careers, as a single unfavorable reference could follow them for years. European-trained servants, particularly those who had worked in English country houses, were often regarded with particular prestige among wealthy American families, who admired the formal service traditions associated with the English aristocracy. It was not uncommon for a Gilded Age millionaire to specifically request an English butler or a French chef when advertising for senior staff, believing that European training carried a higher standard of refinement. This preference led to a modest transatlantic movement of experienced servants, with some English and French staff crossing the Atlantic specifically to take up positions in American mansions. Wages offered in America were sometimes higher than comparable positions in Europe, which made the move appealing for ambitious servants seeking better pay. Formal training for domestic service existed in various forms, ranging from informal apprenticeship under a senior servant to structured training schools that emerged later in the era to meet growing demand for skilled staff. A young footman, for example, would typically learn his duties by shadowing a more experienced footman or under the direct instruction of the butler, gradually taking on greater responsibility as his skills improved. Ladies' maids often needed specialized training in hairdressing, sewing, and the proper care of fine fabrics, sometimes learning these skills through a period working under an established lady's maid before taking on the role independently. This apprenticeship model meant that skill and reputation, rather than formal certification, determined a servant's advancement. Cooks occupied a somewhat unique position within the household hierarchy because their skill was considered a specialized craft, and highly regarded cooks, particularly those trained in French culinary techniques, could command wages significantly higher than other senior servants. Many wealthy families sought cooks trained under the French system associated with figures such as Auguste Escoffier, whose structured approach to kitchen organization influenced how elite American kitchens were run during this period. A skilled cook's reputation could travel between households through word of mouth among the city's wealthiest families, allowing accomplished cooks a degree of career mobility unusual for domestic staff. This specialized status sometimes placed cooks outside the standard servant hierarchy entirely, answering more directly to the family than to the housekeeper. Age and physical appearance sometimes played a role in hiring decisions, particularly for visible household positions such as footmen, where families desired a uniform and elegant appearance among their formal staff. Advertisements for footman positions occasionally specified a preferred height range, as families wished for a matched, symmetrical look when footmen stood together during formal occasions. Ladies' maids and housemaids, by contrast, were typically selected based on skill, references, and temperament rather than physical appearance, since their work took place largely out of sight of guests. This distinction reflected the broader Gilded Age emphasis on visual presentation as a component of household prestige. Live-in service was the dominant arrangement for most domestic staff during this period, meaning that the majority of servants resided within the household itself rather than commuting from outside lodgings. This arrangement provided servants with free room and board as part of their compensation, which was considered a significant financial benefit given the relatively low cash wages typical of the era. Live-in servants were expected to be available at nearly any hour, since the household's needs, particularly those of the family, took precedence over a servant's personal schedule. In contrast, some specialized workers, such as certain gardeners or estate labourers, lived off the property in nearby cottages or villages, commuting daily to their work. New servants were typically given a trial period upon joining a household, during which both the employer and the employee could assess whether the position was a suitable match before a longer-term arrangement was confirmed. This trial period allowed the housekeeper or butler to observe the new servant's competence, punctuality, and ability to follow the household's specific routines and preferences. Households often had highly particular systems for everything from folding linens to serving tea, and a new servant's ability to learn these systems quickly was closely observed during this initial period. Servants who performed well during their trial were formally taken onto the household's permanent staff, often with a small increase in wages to mark the transition. Advancement within domestic service generally required moving between multiple households over the course of a career, as a servant could rarely rise from a junior position to a senior one within the same house, since senior roles were rarely vacated except through retirement or death. A footman aspiring to become a butler, for instance, would typically need to seek a butler's position in a smaller, less prestigious household first, gaining experience before eventually securing a role in a grander establishment. This pattern meant that experienced senior servants often had employment histories spanning several different cities and several different families over the course of 20 or 30 years. Such mobility, while common, required servants to continually build and maintain their professional reputations across an entire regional network of wealthy households. The butler held ultimate authority over the male household staff and was considered the most senior servant in most Gilded Age mansions, responsible for the wine cellar, the household silver, the formal service of meals, and the general discipline of the footmen and hall boys beneath him. A butler's daily responsibilities included overseeing the setting of the dining table, supervising the announcement and seating of guests, and ensuring that formal dinners proceeded with precise, unhurried order from the first course to the last. Because of the trust placed in this role, butlers often held keys to the wine cellar and silver vault personally, and were held directly accountable for the security of these valuable household contents. A respected butler could remain with a single family for decades, becoming an almost permanent fixture of the household. The valet served as the personal attendant to the master of the house, responsible for the care of his clothing, the preparation of his daily attire, and often for accompanying him on travel. A valet's duties included brushing and pressing suits, polishing boots and shoes, laying out clothing appropriate to each part of the day, and assisting with dressing for formal occasions that required precise attention to cufflinks, cravats, or waistcoats. Because valets worked in such close daily proximity to the master, a strong working relationship built on discretion and reliability was considered essential to the role. Many valets developed an intimate knowledge of their employer's personal habits and preferences, functioning almost as a quiet, constant presence throughout the man's day. Footmen occupied the visible, formal layer of male household staff, and their duties included answering the front door, serving at table, accompanying the family in carriages, and assisting with a wide range of household tasks that required both physical strength and a polished appearance. A large household might employ a first footman and a second footman, with the first footman holding slightly greater seniority and responsibility for training junior footmen. Footmen were expected to move through the house with quiet efficiency, timing their movements around formal dinners so that plates were cleared and refilled with minimal disruption to the flow of conversation. Their formal livery, often modeled on historical court dress, distinguished them visually from other household staff. Livery, the distinctive uniform worn by footmen, typically consisted of a coat in the family's chosen color, often paired with knee breeches, stockings, and buckled shoes, a style deliberately reminiscent of 18th century court dress. Buttons on the livery coat were frequently embossed with the family's crest or monogram, a small but significant detail that visually marked the footman as belonging to that specific household. Some of the wealthiest families dressed their footmen in powdered wigs for the most formal occasions, a practice borrowed directly from English aristocratic tradition. The overall visual effect was intended to project timeless elegance and continuity with older European traditions of household service. Hall boys represented the most junior position within the male hierarchy, typically filled by boys in their early teenage years who performed basic tasks such as carrying coal, cleaning boots, running errands, and assisting more senior staff with heavier physical labor. This position served as an entry point into domestic service, allowing a young worker to observe the household's routines and gradually build the skills needed to advance toward a footman's position. Hall boys often slept in small rooms near the kitchen or servants' hall, close to the areas where their labor was most frequently needed. Despite the modest nature of the role, a capable hall boy who demonstrated diligence and reliability could be noticed and promoted more quickly than his peers. The coachman, and later the chauffeur once automobiles became more common in the early 20th century, held a distinct role within the male staff, responsible for the care and operation of the family's transportation. A coachman managed the household's horses and carriages, maintaining the harness and vehicles in immaculate condition, while a chauffeur required a more technical understanding of the mechanical workings of an automobile. This role often came with its own separate living quarters above the carriage house or garage, physically apart from the rest of the servants' wing. The transition from coachman to chauffeur during this period reflected the broader technological changes reshaping American households at the turn of the century. The steward's room, sometimes also called the butler's pantry, served as the butler's private office and workspace within the household, typically located near the dining room and containing the household's silver vault, china cabinets, and the butler's own record books. This room functioned as the administrative center of the male household staff, where the butler planned meal service, tracked silver inventory, and managed the household supply of wine and spirits. The butler's pantry was generally off-limits to junior staff without specific permission, reflecting the trusted and somewhat private nature of the butler's responsibilities. Many surviving Gilded Age mansions preserve these pantries today, offering a glimpse into the quiet, orderly space where the household's most valuable items were kept. Senior male servants, including the butler and sometimes the valet, were traditionally addressed by their surname alone, without the courtesy title of Mr. used for family members or guests, a linguistic distinction that reinforced the household's social hierarchy even in daily speech. Junior staff, by contrast, addressed the butler formally, often simply as Mr. followed by his surname, reflecting his authority within the servant's own hierarchy. This careful system of address extended to nearly every interaction within the household, with specific rules governing how each rank of servant should speak to and about every other rank. Such linguistic formality, though it may seem minor, played an important role in maintaining order within a household staffed by dozens of individuals. The relationship between a butler and the family he served was often one of the longest and most stable professional relationships in the household, with some butlers remaining in service to a single family for their entire working lives, spanning several decades. This longevity allowed a trusted butler to accumulate deep knowledge of the family's preferences, habits, and social circle, making him an invaluable figure within the household's daily operation. Some butlers became so integral to a family's identity that they were mentioned in memoirs, letters, and even occasionally in newspaper society columns describing the family's grand entertaining. Upon a butler's eventual retirement, families sometimes provided a pension or a small cottage on the estate grounds as a mark of gratitude for decades of loyal service. Male household staff were also responsible for a wide range of behind-the-scenes maintenance tasks, including the care of oil lamps and later gas fixtures, the polishing of brass fittings throughout the house, and the general upkeep of the entryways and formal reception rooms where guests would form their first impressions of the household. This work was typically completed early in the morning, well before the family or any guests were awake, so that the public rooms of the house appeared effortlessly immaculate by the time the day's activities began. The precise timing of these tasks required careful coordination among the male staff, who worked according to a strict daily schedule established by the butler. This early morning labor, though largely unseen, was essential to maintaining the seamless, polished appearance for which these great houses were known. The housekeeper held authority over the female household staff comparable to the butler's authority over the male staff, and her responsibilities included managing household linens, overseeing the cleaning routines of every room, and maintaining detailed inventories of china, glassware, and furnishings throughout the house. She typically occupied a private sitting room known as the housekeeper's room, where she conducted household business, met with tradespeople, and reviewed accounts. The housekeeper's role required both administrative skill and an intimate knowledge of the household's preferences, since she was often responsible for training new housemaids in the specific standards expected within that particular family's home. Her position carried significant respect among the staff, and she was generally addressed formally, often as Mrs. regardless of her actual marital status, a customary courtesy title extended to housekeepers of this era. The lady's maid attended personally to the mistress of the house, much as the valet attended to the master, and her duties included dressing the mistress's hair, caring for her wardrobe, and assisting with the elaborate process of dressing for formal occasions, which could involve multiple layers of fine fabric, jewelry, and accessories. A skilled lady's maid needed considerable expertise in sewing and mending, as she was often responsible for small repairs and alterations to the mistress's gowns between wearings. This role required a close, trusted relationship with the mistress, similar to the valet's relationship with the master, and ladies' maids often traveled with their employer when the family moved between their various residences throughout the year. The intimacy of this daily contact meant that a lady's maid's discretion was considered just as important as her practical skill. Housemaids formed the largest group within the female staff of most households, and their responsibilities were typically divided by area of the house, with some housemaids assigned to the family's private bedrooms, others to the public reception rooms, and still others to general cleaning duties throughout the property. A housemaid's morning routine often began before dawn, involving the cleaning of fireplace grates, the laying of new fires, the dusting of furniture, and the careful making of beds according to precise household standards. Housemaids were expected to complete this work quickly and quietly, often before the family had risen, so that each room appeared naturally tidy without any visible evidence of the labor involved. The physical demands of this role were considerable, requiring housemaids to carry water, coal, and cleaning supplies up and down multiple flights of stairs throughout the day. Kitchen maids and scullery maids occupied the most junior positions within the female hierarchy, working under the direction of the cook to prepare ingredients, wash dishes, and maintain the cleanliness of the kitchen itself. Scullery maids in particular were responsible for the most physically demanding kitchen tasks, including scrubbing heavy pots and pans and cleaning the stone or tiled floors of the kitchen after each meal service. This work took place in a hot, busy environment, especially during the preparation of large formal dinners, when the kitchen staff might be required to produce 10 or 11 separate courses in careful sequence. Despite the demanding nature of this work, kitchen positions offered a pathway toward eventually training as a cook, a role that carried both greater status and higher wages. Laundry maids worked within a dedicated laundry department, often housed in a separate section of the basement or an entirely separate outbuilding, equipped with large copper boilers, mangles for pressing linens, and rows of drying racks. The laundering of fine household linens and clothing required considerable skill, particularly in handling delicate fabrics such as lace and fine cotton, which could be easily damaged by improper washing or pressing techniques. A large household's laundry could take several full days each week to complete, given the sheer volume of linens, tablecloths, and clothing generated by a family and staff numbering in the dozens. Laundry maids typically worked in a warm, humid environment, and their labor was considered among the most physically strenuous of all household positions. The nursery, in households with young children, operated as its own small department, staffed by a head nurse or nanny and sometimes assisted by an undernurse or nursery maid, who together were responsible for the daily care, feeding, and early education of the family's children. This staff often lived in close quarters with the children themselves, occupying rooms directly adjacent to the nursery so that a caregiver was always close at hand. As children grew older, governesses were sometimes added to the household staff to provide early academic instruction before children were sent away to formal schooling. The nursery staff held a somewhat distinct position within the household hierarchy, given their close daily involvement with the family's most personal and cherished responsibilities. Sewing rooms were a common feature of larger households, staffed by a dedicated seamstress or sewing maid responsible for mending household linens, altering clothing, and sometimes constructing simple garments entirely from scratch using a Singer sewing machine, a technology that had become widely available by the later decades of the 19th century. This role required considerable skill with a needle and thread, as well as a good eye for matching fabric and thread color precisely. The sewing room often served as a quiet, focused workspace, somewhat removed from the noise and activity of the kitchen or laundry. Skilled sewing maids sometimes worked closely with the lady's maid to prepare and repair the mistress's more delicate garments. Female staff, much like their male counterparts, wore distinct uniforms that varied depending on the time of day and the nature of their duties, with housemaids typically wearing a plain cotton or wool dress with a large apron and cap in the morning, changing into a more formal black dress with a smaller lace-trimmed apron and cap in the afternoon and evening. This shift in uniform reflected the change from heavy cleaning duties in the morning to lighter, more visible duties later in the day, such as answering the door or serving afternoon tea. The precise style of cap and apron often varied slightly from household to household, sometimes reflecting the personal preferences of the housekeeper or the mistress of the house. These uniforms were typically supplied or subsidized by the employer as part of the servant's overall compensation. The housekeeper's linen room served as the central storage point for the household's vast supply of sheets, towels, tablecloths, and napkins, carefully organized by size, quality, and intended use, with the finest linens reserved exclusively for formal entertaining. A well-run linen room maintained detailed records of every item, allowing the housekeeper to track wear and replace worn linens before they became noticeably shabby. Large households might possess several hundred individual linen items at any given time, all of which required regular inventory, laundering, and careful folding according to a specific, uniform method. This meticulous system reflected the broader Gilded Age emphasis on visible order and abundance as markers of a well-managed household. Female staff generally advanced through the household hierarchy along a similar path to male staff, typically beginning as a scullery or kitchen maid, moving into a housemaid position, and eventually, with sufficient experience and strong references, advancing toward the role of lady's maid or housekeeper. This progression could take many years, and a woman's advancement often depended on both her practical skills and her ability to build a strong professional reputation among the network of housekeepers who oversaw hiring in the city's wealthiest households. Some women who reached the position of housekeeper remained unmarried throughout their careers, as the demands of live-in service were considered largely incompatible with maintaining an independent household of one's own. This career path, while demanding, offered many working-class women one of the few available routes toward financial stability and professional respect during this period. The kitchens of the largest Gilded Age mansions were designed as highly specialized spaces, often divided into several distinct rooms including a main kitchen, a pastry kitchen for baking and desserts, a rotisserie or roasting kitchen for meats, and a scullery for washing dishes and preparing vegetables. This division of space mirrored the division of labor among the kitchen staff, with different cooks and assistants specializing in particular types of food preparation. The Biltmore Estates kitchen complex, for example, contained several separate rooms connected by service corridors, allowing multiple dishes to be prepared simultaneously without staff crowding into a single workspace. This level of specialization reflected the influence of professional European kitchen organization on elite American households. The kitchen brigade system, developed and popularized in professional European kitchens, organized culinary staff into a clear hierarchy with the head cook or chef at the top, followed by various specialized positions such as the pastry cook, the sauce cook, and assistant cooks, each responsible for a specific category of dish. This system allowed a large formal dinner with many courses to be prepared efficiently, with each station completing its portion of the meal in careful coordination with the others. American households that employed French-trained cooks often adopted this structured approach, even in kitchens somewhat smaller than the grand European establishments where the system originated. The result was a kitchen that operated with the precision of a well-rehearsed performance during the preparation of a formal dinner. Formal Gilded Age dinners could consist of anywhere from 8 to 14 separate courses, beginning with soup and progressing through fish, a main meat course, a palate-cleansing sorbet, additional meat or game courses, salad, cheese, and finally an elaborate dessert course, each requiring careful timing between the kitchen and the dining room. Coordinating a meal of this complexity required constant communication between the cook and the butler, who needed to know precisely when each course would be ready so that service could proceed without any awkward pause or rush. The physical labor involved in producing such a meal was considerable, often requiring the full kitchen staff working for many hours in advance of the guest's arrival. This elaborate structure of formal dining reflected the broader Gilded Age tendency toward visible abundance and careful ceremony. Ice played an essential role in Gilded Age kitchens, particularly before the widespread adoption of mechanical refrigeration, and large households relied on iceboxes that required daily deliveries of ice blocks harvested from frozen lakes and ponds during the winter months and stored in insulated ice houses for use throughout the year. A dedicated ice house on a large estate might store enough ice, packed in sawdust for insulation, to supply the household's needs well into the warmer summer months. Kitchen staff were responsible for managing this ice supply carefully, since spoiled food represented both a financial loss and a disruption to the household's meal planning. This reliance on natural ice reflects the broader technological landscape of the era, positioned between older methods of food preservation and the mechanical refrigeration that would become common in the following decades. The head cook's responsibilities extended well beyond the actual preparation of food, encompassing the planning of daily menus, the ordering of ingredients from local markets and suppliers, and the careful management of the kitchen's budget, which required balancing the family's expectations for fine dining against the practical costs of ingredients. A skilled cook needed a thorough understanding of seasonal produce, since much of a household's food supply depended on what was locally and seasonally available, particularly before the widespread transportation of fresh goods across long distances became common. Menu planning for formal occasions required considerable creativity, as families entertaining frequently wished to avoid repeating dishes too often before the same circle of guests. This combination of culinary skill and administrative responsibility made the position of head cook one of the most demanding within the entire household staff. Formal household kitchens maintained detailed inventories of copper cookware, which was prized during this era for its excellent heat conductivity, and a large kitchen might possess dozens of individual copper pots, pans, and molds, each requiring regular polishing to prevent tarnishing and to maintain the kitchen's overall appearance of order and abundance. This copper cookware was often displayed prominently on kitchen walls, both for practical accessibility and as a visible symbol of the household's culinary capability. The polishing of copper was typically assigned to a junior kitchen maid, whose daily task included restoring the warm shine of each piece before it was returned to its designated place on the wall. This attention to the visual presentation of even the working kitchen reflected the broader Gilded Age emphasis on order extending into every corner of the household. Bakeries and pastry kitchens within large households produced not only desserts for formal dinners but also the household's daily supply of bread, rolls, and other baked goods, requiring a dedicated pastry cook with specialized training in baking techniques distinct from general cooking. Elaborate dessert courses for formal entertaining might include multi-tiered creations, mold ices, and delicate pastries requiring hours of careful preparation and precise timing to ensure they reach the table in perfect condition. The pastry kitchen typically operated on its own schedule, somewhat separate from the main kitchen's rhythm, since baking required different equipment and different timing than the preparation of savory dishes. This specialization reflected the broader trend toward increasingly refined and elaborate culinary presentation among the wealthiest Gilded Age households. Wine cellars in the grandest households were maintained under the direct supervision of the butler, who kept detailed records of the household's wine inventory, including the vintage, origin, and quantity of each bottle stored within carefully temperature-controlled cellar spaces. Some of the wealthiest Gilded Age families built extensive wine collections numbering in the thousands of bottles, sourced from vineyards across Europe and carefully organized according to type and intended occasion. The butler's knowledge of wine pairing was considered an important professional skill, as he was responsible for selecting appropriate wines to accompany each course of a formal dinner. This careful cellar management reflected both practical necessity and the broader Gilded Age fascination with cultivating an appearance of refined, European-influenced taste. Household gardens and greenhouses supplied many kitchens with fresh produce year-round, and the largest estates maintained extensive kitchen gardens tended by a dedicated staff of gardeners who coordinated closely with the head cook to plan plantings around the household's anticipated culinary needs. Greenhouses allowed households in colder climates to grow certain fruits and vegetables, and even exotic items such as grapes or pineapples, well outside their natural growing season, a costly but impressive demonstration of horticultural skill. This close coordination between the garden staff and the kitchen staff meant that a household's meals often reflected not only seasonal availability but also the specific successes of that year's garden. The kitchen garden itself was typically laid out in a highly organized grid pattern, reflecting the same emphasis on order found throughout the rest of the estate. Formal service of a meal required close coordination between the kitchen staff and the footmen responsible for carrying dishes from the kitchen to the dining room, often through a network of service corridors and dumbwaiters specifically designed to move food efficiently between floors without passing through the family's private living spaces. Dumbwaiters, small mechanical lifts operated by a hand-pulled rope or later by simple mechanical systems, allowed hot food to travel quickly from a basement kitchen to a dining room located one or more floors above, minimizing the time food spent losing its heat in transit. The precise timing of this movement was carefully managed by the butler, who signaled the kitchen when each course should be sent up for service. This system of hidden architecture, entirely invisible to guests seated at the dinner table, represented one of the great practical engineering achievements of the Gilded Age household. Uniforms served both a practical and a symbolic purpose within Gilded Age households, allowing guests and family members to immediately identify a servant's role and rank simply by observing the style, color, and quality of their clothing. The formality and expense of a servant's uniform generally increased alongside their position in the household hierarchy, with senior staff such as the butler and housekeeper wearing more refined, tailored clothing than junior staff performing heavy physical labor. This visual system of rank reinforced the broader household hierarchy in a way that required no verbal explanation, allowing the smooth functioning of a large staff without constant clarification of roles. Uniforms were typically provided or subsidized by the employer, representing a meaningful component of a servant's overall compensation package. The butler typically wore a formal black tailcoat similar in style to formal evening wear worn by gentlemen of the era, distinguishing him visually from the more elaborate livery worn by footmen beneath him. This refined style of dress reflected the butler's senior position and his role as the household's most trusted and dignified representative to guests. A butler's attire remained largely consistent throughout the day, unlike the uniforms of junior staff, which often changed according to the specific task being performed. This consistency in dress reinforced the butler's steady, unwavering presence at the center of the household's daily operations. Housemaids' uniforms typically evolved throughout the day to reflect the changing nature of their duties, beginning with a plain, practical morning uniform in a durable fabric such as cotton or wool, suited to heavy cleaning tasks such as laying fires and scrubbing floors. By the afternoon, once the heaviest cleaning work was complete, housemaids often changed into a more refined black dress accompanied by a smaller, more decorative apron and cap, appropriate for the lighter, more visible duties of answering doors or serving afternoon tea. This shift in uniform throughout the day required careful timing, and housemaids needed to complete their morning tasks and change their clothing before the family's typical late morning rising hour. The practice reflected the broader Gilded Age expectation that even the physical evidence of labor should remain invisible to the family and their guests. Livery buttons worn by footmen were often custom-made and embossed with the specific crest, monogram, or symbol associated with the employing family, a detail that added considerable expense to the footman's uniform and reinforced the personal, almost heraldic nature of formal household service. Some families commissioned entire sets of buttons from specialized manufacturers, ensuring that every footman's uniform displayed an identical, precisely matched design. This attention to detail extended to the color of the livery itself, which families sometimes selected to complement their family colors, their coat of arms, or the color scheme of their formal reception rooms. Such customization reflected the broader Gilded Age tendency to treat household staff, in part, as a visible extension of the family's own identity and status. Ladies' maids typically dressed in a more refined manner than housemaids, often wearing dark, well-fitted dresses without an apron, reflecting their closer daily proximity to the mistress of the house and their more delicate, less physically demanding duties. This subtle distinction in dress reinforced the lady's maid's higher status within the female hierarchy, positioning her visually between the housekeeper and the general housemaid staff. A lady's maid's own appearance was considered a small reflection of her mistress's taste and refinement, given how frequently she appeared alongside her in private and semi-private settings. This connection between a lady's maid's appearance and her mistress's reputation added an additional layer of pressure to maintain an immaculate, tasteful presentation at all times. Caps worn by female household staff varied considerably in style and formality, ranging from simple, practical cotton caps worn by kitchen and scullery maids to more elaborate lace-trimmed caps worn by housemaids and ladies' maids during formal afternoon and evening duties. These caps served a practical function, keeping hair neatly contained during physical labor, while also serving as a visible marker of rank within the female hierarchy. The specific style of cap sometimes reflected regional or household traditions, with certain families maintaining particular preferences passed down through generations of housekeepers. This attention to small details of dress, though seemingly minor, contributed to the overall visual order and uniformity that wealthy families valued within their households. Aprons worn by female staff also varied by role and time of day, with large, full-coverage aprons worn during heavy cleaning or kitchen work, and smaller, more decorative aprons worn during lighter afternoon duties such as serving tea or answering the door to guests. This distinction allowed a household staff to transition seamlessly between the practical demands of morning labor and the more visible, formal requirements of afternoon and evening service. The fabric and trim of an apron often indicated its intended use, with plain, durable cotton reserved for kitchen and laundry work, and finer materials such as lace-trimmed linen reserved for more visible duties. This careful attention to appropriate dress for each specific task reflected the broader Gilded Age value placed on order, precision, and visible refinement. Some of the wealthiest households outfitted their footmen in powdered wigs for the most formal occasions, a striking visual tradition borrowed directly from 18th-century European court dress, intended to evoke a sense of timeless aristocratic elegance. This practice required careful daily maintenance, as the wig needed to be properly powdered and styled before each formal event, adding an additional task to the footman's already demanding preparation routine. While not universal, this tradition appeared among some of the most socially ambitious Gilded Age families, particularly those seeking to emulate the household customs of European nobility as closely as possible. The powdered wig, though largely ceremonial by this period even in Europe, served as a visible symbol of a household's wealth and its careful attention to tradition. Household staff uniforms required regular replacement and careful maintenance, and the housekeeper typically kept a detailed record of each staff member's uniform allowance, ensuring that clothing remained in presentable condition throughout the year. Torn or excessively worn uniforms reflected poorly on the household's overall standard of order, and housekeepers were expected to address such issues promptly, either through repair in the household's own sewing room or through the purchase of replacement garments. This ongoing attention to staff appearance represented a meaningful, recurring expense within a household's overall budget, particularly for families employing dozens of staff members across multiple departments. The careful maintenance of uniforms reflected the same broader emphasis on visible order that governed nearly every aspect of Gilded Age domestic life. Beyond their practical and hierarchical functions, household uniforms also served a quieter symbolic purpose, allowing individual servants to become, in some sense, visually interchangeable representatives of their role rather than distinct individuals, a dynamic that reflected the broader Gilded Age expectation that staff should remain visually consistent and unobtrusive within the household's overall aesthetic. This uniformity extended even to small details such as matching hairstyles or the precise angle at which a cap should be worn, standards that some households enforced with considerable rigor. Despite this outward uniformity, individual servants developed their own personal reputations and relationships within the household, distinct from the standardized appearance they presented to guests and family. This tension between visible uniformity and individual identity formed a quiet, constant undercurrent within the daily life of household service. Gilded Age mansions were architecturally designed with a clear physical separation between the family's living spaces and the servants' working and living areas. a division reflected in the very structure of the building itself, with servants typically occupying basement levels, attic floors, or a distinct service wing entirely separate from the family's rooms. This architectural separation was reinforced by the use of entirely separate staircases, doorways, and corridors, allowing staff to move throughout the house performing their duties without ever needing to pass through the family's private or formal living spaces. Architects working on these grand houses paid careful attention to this hidden infrastructure, designing service corridors that connected the kitchen, laundry, and storage areas efficiently while remaining completely invisible from the family's public rooms. This dual architecture, one visible and one hidden, represented one of the defining structural features of the Great Gilded Age household. The back stairs, sometimes called the servants' stairs, provided a separate vertical circulation route through the house, allowing staff to move between floors while carrying coal, linens, meals, or cleaning supplies without using the family's grand front staircase. These stairs were typically narrower, steeper, and less ornately decorated than the family's staircase, reflecting their purely functional purpose within the household's daily operation. In some of the largest mansions, multiple sets of back stairs served different sections of the house, allowing staff to reach any room efficiently without unnecessary travel through unrelated parts of the building. The existence of these hidden staircases meant that a servant could, in theory, move from the basement kitchen to an upper bedroom without ever being seen by a family member in a formal room of the house. Servants' bedrooms were typically small, simply furnished spaces containing a narrow bed, a washstand, a small chest of drawers, and occasionally a single chair, reflecting both the practical space constraints of the attic or basement areas where they were located and the generally modest standard of comfort considered appropriate for household staff during this period. Junior staff often shared rooms with one or two other servants of the same gender and similar rank, while senior staff such as the housekeeper or butler were typically given the privacy of their own private room, a modest but meaningful mark of their seniority. These rooms were usually heated only minimally, if at all, meaning that servants' quarters could be considerably colder in winter than the family's well-heated living spaces below. Despite their modest size, these rooms represented private space that many young servants, particularly those from crowded working-class family homes, had rarely experienced before entering domestic service. The servants' hall functioned as the central communal space for household staff, serving as both a dining room and a general gathering area where staff could rest briefly between duties, and it was typically located near the kitchen in the basement level of the house. This room was furnished simply but comfortably, usually containing a long wooden table, benches, or chairs, and sometimes a small fireplace to provide warmth during the colder months. Meals in the servants' hall followed their own hierarchy, with upper servants such as the butler and housekeeper often taking their meals separately in the housekeeper's room, apart from the general body of junior staff. The servants' hall represented one of the few spaces within the household where staff could interact somewhat freely, away from the formal expectations governing their behavior in the family's presence. Household bells and speaking tubes formed an essential communication system connecting the family's rooms to the servants' working areas, allowing a family member to summon a specific servant to a specific room simply by pulling a designated bell cord. Each bell was connected to a numbered board typically located in the servants' hall or the butler's pantry, with a small indicator or gently swinging bell showing precisely which room had issued the summons. This system allowed a household staff of dozens of people to remain responsive to the family's needs at any moment, without requiring family members to physically seek out available staff throughout the large house. The gentle, distinctive sound of these bells became one of the defining ambient sounds of daily life within a great Gilded Age mansion. Some of the largest and most technologically advanced Gilded Age mansions incorporated speaking tubes in addition to bell systems, simple hollow pipes running between floors that allowed voice communication between the family's rooms and the kitchen or servants' hall, functioning as an early precursor to the household intercom systems that would become common in later decades. These speaking tubes were particularly useful for coordinating meal timing, allowing the housekeeper or butler to communicate directly with the kitchen staff about the precise readiness of a dish without needing to send a messenger down several flights of stairs. The installation of such systems represented a significant investment in household infrastructure, reflecting the technological sophistication increasingly associated with the grandest Gilded Age homes. This early network of household communication technology laid conceptual groundwork for the more advanced systems that would appear in 20th century homes. The housekeeper's room and the butler's pantry served as the two central administrative hubs of the servants' quarters, each functioning as a private office for the household's most senior staff, distinct from the general communal spaces used by junior servants. These rooms typically contained locked cabinets for valuable household items, detailed record books, and comfortable furnishings reflecting the relatively elevated status of their occupants within the servant hierarchy. Junior staff generally entered these rooms only when summoned, reinforcing the clear lines of authority that structured daily life below stairs. The relative privacy and comfort of these two rooms stood in marked contrast to the shared, simply furnished spaces occupied by the household's more junior servants. Storage rooms throughout the servants' quarters held an extensive array of household supplies, including linens, china, silver, candles, and cleaning materials, each carefully organized and typically kept under lock and key, with access controlled by the housekeeper or butler depending on the specific category of item. Large households required significant storage space simply to house the sheer quantity of goods necessary to maintain formal entertaining on a regular basis, including specialized items such as ice cream molds, punch bowls, and seasonal decorations used only a few times each year. This extensive storage infrastructure reflected the broader Gilded Age tendency toward material abundance, with households maintaining far more household goods than were needed for daily use, reserved instead for the occasional grand formal occasion. The careful organization of these storage spaces required ongoing attention from senior staff to ensure that items remained in good condition between uses. Some grand estates included separate housing structures entirely apart from the main house, such as a gate lodge for staff responsible for monitoring the estate's entrance, or small cottages for married senior staff such as a head gardener or estate steward who required family accommodation beyond what the main house's servants' quarters could provide. These separate structures allowed certain staff members a greater degree of independence and privacy than was typically available to live-in servants residing within the main house itself. The presence of these outbuildings across a large estate reflected the sheer scale of staffing required to maintain such properties, extending the household's workforce well beyond the walls of the main residence. This distributed housing system also reflected differences in status among various types of estate staff, with outdoor and specialized positions sometimes afforded greater independence than indoor domestic roles. The architectural design of servants' quarters evolved gradually throughout the Gilded Age, with later mansions, built in the final years of the 19th century and the earliest years of the 20th, incorporating improved ventilation, better lighting, and somewhat more comfortable furnishings for staff compared to earlier structures, reflecting a slow but noticeable shift in attitudes towards servant welfare. Architects and household reformers of the period occasionally wrote about the importance of adequate servant accommodation, arguing that comfortable, well-maintained quarters helped households retain skilled, loyal staff for longer periods. Despite these gradual improvements, servants' quarters throughout the era remained considerably more modest than the family's own living spaces, reflecting the enduring social distance between employer and employee that defined the domestic service relationship. This slow evolution in architectural attitudes offers a quiet window into the broader social changes beginning to reshape American households as the 20th century approached. A typical servant's day in a large Gilded Age household began well before dawn, often as early as 5 or 5:30 in the morning, particularly for junior staff responsible for laying fires and preparing the house before the family awakened. This early start allowed housemaids and footmen to complete the heaviest and most visible cleaning tasks, such as sweeping hearths and dusting formal rooms, before the family began stirring, typically around 8 or 9 in the morning. The precise start time varied somewhat depending on the household and the specific season, since fires needed to be lit earlier during the colder winter months to ensure the family's rooms were comfortably warm by the time they rose. This early morning routine set the rhythm for the rest of the household's day, establishing a pattern of quiet, efficient labor that continued largely unnoticed by the family above. Breakfast for the household staff was typically served in the servants' hall shortly after the earliest morning tasks were completed, offering a brief period of rest before the household's main daily duties began in earnest. This meal, though simple compared to the family's own breakfast, provided an important opportunity for staff to gather, share news, and coordinate the day's responsibilities among different departments. The timing of staff breakfast needed to be carefully managed so that it did not interfere with the ongoing preparation of the family's own morning meal, which was typically served somewhat later in a separate dining room. This daily rhythm of staff meals, carefully timed around the family's own schedule, reflected the broader pattern of invisible coordination that governed nearly every aspect of household service. The middle portion of the servant's day was typically devoted to ongoing household maintenance, including laundry, silver polishing, food preparation, and the continued cleaning of rooms not used by the family during the early morning hours. This period allowed staff to complete more time-consuming tasks that did not require the same level of urgency as the early morning preparations, such as the thorough weekly cleaning of a particular room or the careful polishing of an extensive silver collection. Senior staff used this time to manage administrative tasks, such as reviewing household accounts or planning the details of upcoming formal entertaining. This portion of the day, while less visibly dramatic than the flurry of activity surrounding a formal dinner, represented the steady, ongoing labor that kept a great house functioning smoothly day after day. Afternoon tea represented an important daily ritual within many wealthy Gilded Age households, requiring careful preparation and formal service by the household staff, typically involving a footman or parlor maid bringing a tea tray to the family's drawing room at a set hour each afternoon. This service required precise coordination between the kitchen, which prepared small sandwiches, cakes, and other refreshments, and the footman or maid responsible for the formal presentation of the tea itself. The ritual of afternoon tea provided a structured pause in the family's day, and its smooth, unhurried service reflected the broader household value placed on visible calm and effortless hospitality. Staff needed to anticipate this daily ritual precisely, ensuring that all necessary preparations were complete well before the family gathered for their afternoon refreshment. Evening duties intensified considerably in households hosting formal dinners, requiring the full coordination of kitchen, dining, and household staff over the course of several hours, beginning with the careful setting of the dining table hours before guests arrived and continuing through the extended, multi-course service of the meal itself. The butler typically oversaw this entire process, ensuring that each course was served at precisely the correct moment and that any small mishaps remained entirely invisible to the family and their guests. Footmen and parlor maids moved through the dining room with practiced, quiet efficiency, refilling glasses and clearing plates according to a carefully established rhythm developed through years of experience working together as a team. This evening service represented the most visible, high-stakes portion of the household staff's daily responsibilities, requiring the accumulated skill of the entire domestic team functioning together seamlessly. Household staff typically continued working until the family retired for the evening, often quite late, particularly on evenings involving formal entertaining that might extend well past midnight, requiring staff to remain available until the last guest had departed and the family's needs for the day had been fully attended to. This meant that a servant's working day could easily extend to 14 or 16 hours, particularly during the busiest social seasons of the year, when formal dinners and receptions occurred with considerable frequency. Despite the length of these working days, servants generally understood this demanding schedule as an accepted, unremarkable feature of domestic service during this period. The eventual quiet that settled over the house once the family had retired marked the true end of the household staff's long working day. Most households granted servants a partial day off each week, commonly a half day on a designated afternoon, along with occasional additional free time depending on the specific arrangements of the household and the generosity of the employing family. This limited free time was highly valued by servants, offering a rare opportunity to visit family members, attend religious services, or simply enjoy a few hours away from the demands of household duties. Servants typically needed to request and coordinate this free time carefully with the housekeeper or butler, ensuring that sufficient staff remained available to cover the household's ongoing needs. The relatively limited nature of this personal time reflects the considerable demands placed on live-in domestic staff throughout the Gilded Age, for whom work and home life were largely inseparable. Sunday schedules in many households differed somewhat from the rest of the week, often incorporating time for staff to attend religious services, with some households arranging staggered schedules so that a portion of the domestic staff could attend morning worship while others remained to manage the household's essential ongoing needs. Families themselves often observed a somewhat quieter Sunday routine, with fewer formal entertaining engagements, which in turn allowed household staff a comparatively lighter workload compared to the demands of a typical weekday. This weekly rhythm reflected the broader religious and social customs of the period, in which Sunday held particular significance as a day set somewhat apart from the ordinary business of the week. Even within this lighter schedule, however, the household's basic operational needs, including meal preparation and general upkeep, continued largely uninterrupted. Seasonal migration between a family's various residences, such as a townhouse in the city and a summer cottage in a location like Newport, required careful advance planning by the household staff, who needed to pack, transport, and re-establish the household's entire operation in a new location, sometimes multiple times each year. This process involved careful coordination of trunks, household linens, and sometimes even portions of the kitchen equipment, transported by rail or carriage between the family's different properties. Senior staff such as the housekeeper often traveled ahead of the family to ensure that the new residence was fully prepared and staffed appropriately before the family's arrival. This seasonal rhythm added an additional layer of complexity to the household staff's already demanding responsibilities, requiring flexibility and careful logistical planning throughout the year. Despite the demanding and highly structured nature of a servant's daily schedule, many households developed small, informal traditions and moments of quiet respite within the working day, such as a shared cup of tea in the servants' hall during a brief lull in the afternoon, or a few minutes of quiet conversation shared between staff members while completing a routine task together. These small moments, though rarely documented in formal household records, formed an important part of the lived experience of domestic service, offering brief pockets of warmth and connection within an otherwise demanding routine. Surviving letters and memoirs from former domestic staff occasionally describe these quiet moments with particular fondness, suggesting their meaningful place within the daily rhythm of below-stairs life. This blend of rigid structure and quiet, informal connection characterized the daily experience of household service throughout the Gilded Age. Wages for domestic servants during the Gilded Age varied considerably depending on the specific role, the servant's level of experience, and the wealth of the employing household, with senior staff such as butlers and housekeepers earning significantly more than junior staff such as scullery maids or hall boys. A butler in a wealthy household might earn several times the wage of a junior housemaid, reflecting both his greater responsibility and the years of experience required to reach such a senior position. These wages were typically paid in addition to room, board, and uniforms, meaning that a servant's total compensation included considerably more value than the cash wage alone might suggest. This combination of cash wages and provided necessities made domestic service, despite its demanding schedule, a comparatively stable form of employment for many working-class individuals during this period. Room and board, provided as part of a live-in servant's compensation, represented a significant portion of their overall economic benefit, since it eliminated the need to pay separately for housing and food, expenses that consumed a considerable portion of income for many working-class families living outside of service. This arrangement meant that domestic servants, despite relatively modest cash wages, often had greater opportunity to save money over time compared to workers in other low-wage industries who needed to cover their own housing and food costs independently. Many servants used these savings to support family members, to build toward eventual marriage, or simply to establish a small financial cushion for the future. This practical economic advantage helps explain why domestic service remained an appealing option for many young workers despite its demanding schedule and limited personal freedom. Veils, a traditional practice involving small monetary tips given to servants by visiting guests, particularly at the conclusion of a stay or after a formal dinner, represented an additional, somewhat unpredictable source of income for household staff, particularly footmen and other visible service positions. While this practice had been more common in earlier centuries and was gradually declining by the height of the Gilded Age, it persisted in various forms, especially among visiting guests accustomed to older European customs of household service. Some employers viewed the practice of veils with mixed feelings, since it created a form of income for staff that existed somewhat outside the household's direct control. This tradition offers an interesting window into the broader economic relationships woven throughout Gilded Age domestic life, extending beyond the simple employer-employee wage relationship. Working hours for domestic staff during this period were generally long by modern standards, often extending to 14 hours or more during particularly busy periods of formal entertaining, though the specific demands varied considerably depending on the household's social calendar and the particular role a servant held. Certain positions, such as a lady's maid or valet, required availability at somewhat irregular hours, since their duties were tied directly to the family's own schedule rather than a fixed daily routine. This demanding schedule was generally understood and accepted as a standard feature of domestic service during this era, though occasional household guides and reform-minded writers of the period did begin to discuss the importance of reasonable rest periods for household staff. The gradual emergence of these discussions reflects the broader social conversations beginning to develop around labor conditions during the final decades of the 19th century. Servants employed by extremely wealthy Gilded Age families, such as the Vanderbilts or Aestiers, generally received wages somewhat higher than those offered by more modest households, reflecting both the greater financial resources available to these families and the more demanding, high-profile nature of service within such prominent establishments. Working within one of these highly visible households also carried a certain prestige within the broader servant community, since experience gained in a famous mansion could enhance a servant's reputation and future employment prospects. This created a competitive market for positions within the most prestigious households, with experienced, highly skilled servants often seeking opportunities to work for the wealthiest and most socially prominent families of the era. This dynamic mirrored, in its own way, the broader competitive social dynamics that defined much of Gilded Age society itself. Written contracts or formal agreements between servants and employers were relatively uncommon during this period, with most domestic service arrangements instead relying on verbal agreements regarding wages, duties, and living arrangements, formalized primarily through the exchange of written references between employers rather than a binding legal contract. This informal system placed considerable weight on trust and reputation, since a servant had limited formal legal recourse if an employer failed to honor the agreed terms of employment. Despite this lack of formal contractual protection, a strong, well-established reputation among the network of housekeepers and registry offices provided servants with a meaningful, if informal, form of professional security. This reliance on reputation over formal contract reflects the broader social customs governing labor relationships during this period of American history. Domestic staff during the Gilded Age were drawn from a wide range of backgrounds, including many immigrants from Ireland, Germany, and Scandinavian countries, who found domestic service to be one of the more accessible forms of stable employment available to newly arrived immigrants during this period. Irish immigrant women, in particular, were heavily represented in domestic service roles throughout many American cities during the latter half of the 19th century, often finding positions through community networks and word of mouth among recently settled immigrant communities. This diversity of background contributed to the broader cultural texture of the household staff, with servants sometimes bringing culinary traditions, household customs, or simply personal warmth from their countries of origin into the households where they served. The presence of these varied backgrounds within a single household staff reflects the broader story of immigration and labor shaping American society during this transformative period. Some households employed staff of African American descent, particularly in regions and families with connections to the American South, where household service traditions carried a distinct regional history separate from the broader immigrant-dominated service culture of northern cities. These staff members sometimes held specialized roles, such as skilled cooks whose culinary traditions were highly regarded among the families who employed them. The specific experience of African American household staff during this period varied considerably depending on the region, the individual household, and the broader social context of the surrounding community. This regional diversity within American domestic service reflects the complex and varied social landscape of the late 19th century United States. The physical demands of domestic service, including the frequent carrying of heavy items such as coal, water, and laundry up and down multiple flights of stairs, meant that household staff required considerable physical stamina, particularly those in more junior positions responsible for the heaviest manual labor within the household. Housekeepers and butlers, in hiring junior staff, often paid close attention to a candidate's apparent physical health and stamina, recognizing that the demanding daily routine required genuine physical resilience over the course of many years. Despite these considerable physical demands, domestic service was generally regarded as steadier and somewhat less physically dangerous than certain other forms of working-class labor available during this period, such as factory or mining work. This relative stability, combined with the provision of room and board, contributed to the continued appeal of domestic service as a career path for many young working-class individuals. Retirement for long-serving domestic staff varied considerably depending on the generosity and circumstances of the individual employing family, with some households providing a modest pension, a small cottage on the estate grounds, or a lump sum payment to servants who had given many years of loyal service, particularly to senior staff such as a longtime butler or housekeeper. Other servants, particularly those in more junior or transient positions, had comparatively little formal security upon leaving service, relying instead on personal savings accumulated over years of employment. The absence of any broad, formalized pension system during this period meant that a comfortable retirement for household staff depended considerably on the specific relationship built with an individual employing family over the course of a career. This variability in post-service security reflects the broader absence of formal labor protections that characterized much of American employment during the late 19th century. One of the central principles governing domestic service during the Gilded Age was the concept of invisibility, meaning that well-trained staff were expected to perform their duties as unobtrusively as possible, moving through the household in a manner that drew as little attention as possible from the family and their guests. This principle extended to specific behavioral rules, such as avoiding direct eye contact with family members during formal service, and speaking only when necessary and typically only in response to a direct question or instruction. The underlying purpose of this expectation was to create an atmosphere in which the household appeared to function effortlessly, with the considerable labor required to maintain it remaining largely hidden from view. This philosophy of invisible service shaped nearly every aspect of a servant's training and daily conduct within the household. Household etiquette manuals of the period, written both for employers and for servants themselves, offered detailed guidance on proper conduct, covering everything from the correct manner of announcing a guest's arrival to the precise sequence in which dishes should be presented and cleared during a formal dinner. These manuals reflected the broader Gilded Age fascination with formal social ritual, extending the same careful attention to protocol that governed upper-class social behavior into the detailed conduct expected of household staff. Housekeepers and butlers often used these published guides as reference materials when training new staff, ensuring a consistent standard of formal service across different households. The existence of such detailed published guidance reflects just how seriously formal household etiquette was regarded throughout this period of American social history. Servants were generally expected to use specific, formal modes of address when speaking with or about members of the family, referring to the master and mistress of the house by their proper titles rather than by name, and using similarly formal titles when referring to the family's children, regardless of their young age. This careful linguistic formality reinforced the broader social distance considered appropriate between employer and employee throughout this period. Junior staff also observed specific rules regarding how they addressed senior staff, creating a comprehensive system of formal address that extended throughout every level of the household hierarchy. This attention to precise, respectful language reflected the broader Gilded Age emphasis on visible order and social structure extending into even the smallest details of daily interaction. The rule against servants using the family's front staircase or main entrance, except under specific formal circumstances such as serving at a dinner party, represented one of the clearest physical expressions of the household's social hierarchy, reinforcing the careful separation between the family's visible world and the household staff's largely hidden working world. Servants were instead expected to use the back stairs and service entrances at all times, a rule so deeply ingrained that it typically required little enforcement once a new servant had been properly trained in the household's expectations. This physical separation extended even to certain hallways and corridors within larger mansions, which were designated exclusively for staff use in order to keep servants largely out of the family's everyday sightline. This architectural and behavioral rule reflects the broader Gilded Age preference for maintaining a clear, visible boundary between the family's world and the labor that sustained it. Formal dinner service followed an extremely precise sequence of movements, with footmen trained to approach guests from a specific side, typically the left, when serving food, and to clear plates only once every guest at the table had finished a particular course, ensuring a uniform, coordinated pace throughout the meal. This careful choreography required considerable practice and coordination among the serving staff, who needed to move in careful synchronization without any spoken communication during the meal itself. The butler typically oversaw this process closely, using subtle visual signals to coordinate the timing of each course's presentation and removal. This precise, almost theatrical choreography of formal dining represented one of the most visible demonstrations of a household staff's collective skill and training. Household staff were generally expected to maintain strict discretion regarding the family's private affairs, conversations, and personal habits, a professional expectation considered essential to the trust required for effective domestic service. Servants who gained a reputation for gossiping about their employers, whether within the servants' hall or beyond the household entirely, risked serious damage to their professional reputation and future employment prospects. This expectation of discretion extended even to interactions with other household staff, since news traveled quickly through the broader network of domestic servants employed across a city's wealthiest families. This professional code of confidentiality reflects the considerable trust that families needed to place in their household staff, who were privy to the most intimate details of daily life within the home. Specific rules governed how household staff should respond when encountering a family member or guest unexpectedly within the house, such as stepping aside quietly to allow the family member to pass, or turning to face a wall in certain especially formal households to avoid direct eye contact during a brief passing encounter. While practices varied somewhat between households, This general emphasis on minimizing direct interaction reflected the broader philosophy of invisible service that shaped domestic staff conduct throughout the period. New servants typically needed to learn these specific household customs quickly, since even small departures from expected behavior could be noticed and corrected by senior staff or the family itself. This careful attention to even brief, incidental interactions demonstrates just how thoroughly formal etiquette shaped every aspect of daily life within these grand households. The proper care and handling of the family's personal correspondence represented another area governed by careful household etiquette, with staff responsible for collecting, sorting, and delivering mail expected to handle these items with complete discretion, never reading or discussing their contents. Butlers typically managed the collection and presentation of the master's correspondence, while a lady's maid might assist with similar tasks for the mistress of the house. This careful handling of private correspondence reflected the broader expectation of confidentiality that governed nearly every aspect of a servant's interaction with the family's personal affairs. The trust placed in staff to handle such private matters appropriately represented an important, quiet component of the overall employer-servant relationship. Formal calling card etiquette required careful handling by household staff, particularly footmen responsible for answering the door, who needed to understand the precise social protocols governing how calling cards should be received, presented, and recorded when visitors called at the house. A footman would typically receive a visitor's card on a small silver tray, then present it to the mistress of the house, who would determine whether she was available to receive the caller based on a complex, largely unspoken set of social rules regarding acquaintance and appropriate calling hours. This system required footmen to develop a working knowledge of the family's social circle, since recognizing familiar callers helped the household navigate these interactions smoothly. This careful ritual surrounding calling cards represents one of the many small but socially significant tasks that fell within a footman's broader responsibilities. Despite the rigid formality governing most staff behavior, certain moments within the household allowed for slightly warmer, more personal interactions between family members and long-serving staff, particularly senior servants such as a butler or housekeeper who had worked within a household for many years and developed a genuine, if carefully bounded, relationship of mutual trust and familiarity. These relationships, while still governed by the underlying structure of employer and employee, sometimes softened over years of shared experience, particularly around significant family occasions such as weddings or the raising of children within the household. Surviving letters and family memoirs occasionally reflect genuine affection and respect between family members and their longtime senior staff. This quiet complexity within the formal structure of Gilded Age domestic service reflects the genuinely human relationships that developed, even within a system built around careful social distance. The decline of large-scale domestic service in America began gradually in the early decades of the 20th century, driven by a combination of factors including the rise of alternative employment opportunities in factories and offices, the introduction of labor-saving household technologies, and broader shifts in social attitudes toward household labor. Many of the great Gilded Age mansions that had once employed staffs of 50 or more individuals gradually reduced their household staff over subsequent decades, reflecting both changing economic circumstances and the evolving expectations of a new generation of household workers. This gradual transformation marked the slow end of the elaborate, highly structured system of domestic service that had defined household life among America's wealthiest families during the final decades of the 19th century. The world of the Gilded Age servant, though it faded gradually rather than disappearing all at once, represents a distinctive and carefully documented chapter within the broader history of American domestic life. Many former domestic servants who had spent years working within Gilded Age households eventually transitioned into other forms of employment as the broader economy changed, with some moving into hospitality roles such as hotel service, where the skills developed in formal household service translated readily into similar professional expectations. Others used the savings accumulated through years of live-in service to establish small businesses or to support their own families in entirely new ways. This gradual transition reflects the broader adaptability of workers navigating a changing American economy during the early 20th century. The skills, discipline, and professional reputation built through years of domestic service often provided a valuable foundation for these later career transitions. Several of the great Gilded Age mansions that once employed large domestic staffs have since been preserved as museums, allowing modern visitors to walk through both the grand formal rooms once occupied by the family and the hidden service areas once occupied by household staff, offering a rare, tangible connection to this particular chapter of American history. Properties such as the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina and several of the Newport mansions in Rhode Island maintain preserved servants' quarters, kitchens, and service corridors alongside their more famous formal rooms. These preserved spaces provide historians and visitors alike with valuable physical evidence of how these grand households actually functioned on a daily basis. This preservation effort reflects a growing historical recognition of the household staff's essential, if often overlooked, role within the broader story of Gilded Age wealth and society. Historical societies and museum curators have increasingly focused research attention on the lives of domestic servants themselves, drawing on surviving household ledgers, employment records, personal letters, and oral histories to reconstruct a more complete picture of daily life below stairs during the Gilded Age. This research has gradually shifted the broader historical narrative surrounding these great houses, moving beyond a sole focus on the wealthy families who owned them to include the equally important stories of the men and women who kept these households running. Such research often uncovers small, personal details, such as a housemaid's handwritten diary entry or a footman's carefully preserved letter of reference, that offer intimate glimpses into individual servants' experiences. This ongoing historical work continues to deepen our understanding of the complex, carefully structured world that existed just below the surface of Gilded Age high society. The architectural legacy of Gilded Age service design, including features such as dumbwaiters, servant staircases, and carefully hidden service corridors, continued to influence residential architecture for several decades afterward, even as the scale of domestic staffing gradually declined throughout the 20th century. Some of these architectural features, originally designed purely for practical service purposes, are now regarded as historically significant elements of these preserved mansions, studied by architectural historians interested in the evolution of American residential design. This lasting architectural influence demonstrates how thoroughly the practical needs of domestic service shaped the physical structure of these grand houses, extending far beyond simply providing living quarters for staff. The careful, hidden engineering required to support a household of this scale remains a quiet testament to the ingenuity involved in Gilded Age domestic architecture. Descendants of Gilded Age domestic servants have, in some cases, contributed personal family histories, photographs, and preserved letters to historical archives and museum collections, adding valuable first-hand perspective to the broader historical record of household service during this period. These family accounts often describe the pride many former servants held in their professional skills and their long service to particular households, alongside candid reflections on the demanding nature of the work itself. Such personal accounts provide a valuable counterbalance to more formal, institutional records, offering a warmer, more individual perspective on what daily life within these households actually felt like. This ongoing contribution of family history continues to enrich our broader understanding of the Gilded Age servant experience. The formal hierarchy and structured daily routines that once defined Gilded Age domestic service gradually gave way, over the course of the 20th century, to smaller household staffs performing a broader range of general duties, reflecting the decline of the highly specialized, department-based system that had characterized the largest 19th-century mansions. This shift mirrored broader changes in American household technology and social structure, as labor-saving devices such as electric washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and eventually dishwashers gradually reduced the sheer physical labor required to maintain a large home. The elaborate, multi-departmental household staff of the Gilded Age era became, over subsequent decades, a distinctive historical phenomenon rather than an ongoing feature of American domestic life. Contemporary historical interpretation of Gilded Age domestic service increasingly emphasizes the considerable skill, knowledge, and professional expertise required of household staff during this period, moving away from earlier historical narratives that sometimes portrayed servants as a largely anonymous backdrop to the more prominent stories of the wealthy families they served. Modern museum exhibits and historical tours increasingly highlight specific individual roles, such as the precise technical knowledge required of a skilled cook or the careful administrative skill required of an experienced housekeeper, presenting domestic service as a genuine, respected profession rather than simply unskilled labor. This evolving historical perspective reflects a broader, ongoing effort within the historical field to present a more complete and balanced picture of daily life during the Gilded Age. This shift in historical framing continues to shape how modern audiences understand and appreciate this particular chapter of American social history. The distinctive architecture, technology, and social structure of the Gilded Age household staff system offers historians valuable insight into broader patterns of American economic and social development during the late 19th century, illustrating the considerable wealth concentrated among a small number of families alongside the equally significant labor force required to sustain that wealth's visible expression. Studying this system provides a useful window into the era's broader technological transitions, from oil lamps to gas lighting to early electricity, and from horse-drawn carriages to early automobiles, all of which were reflected in the evolving roles of household staff over this period. This historical study also illuminates broader patterns of immigration, labor, and social mobility that shaped American society during this transformative several decades. The careful, detailed history of Gilded Age domestic service thus offers far more than simply an interesting glimpse into a vanished world, providing genuine insight into the broader forces shaping American history during this period. Tonight, as we come to the close of this long, quiet walk through the hidden corridors and busy kitchens of the Gilded Age household, it is worth resting for a moment on the sheer scale of coordinated human effort that once sustained these grand houses, a vast, largely invisible network of butlers, housekeepers, cooks, maids, footmen, and countless other staff members working together with quiet precision to maintain an appearance of effortless elegance above stairs. Their carefully structured world, governed by precise schedules, formal hierarchies, and countless small unspoken rules, represented a genuine profession requiring skill, discipline, and years of accumulated experience, much of which has only gradually come to be fully appreciated by modern historians. As you drift now towards sleep, let the quiet rhythm of that world settle gently around you. The soft ringing of a distant bell, the warm glow of a basement kitchen fire, and the slow, steady footsteps of a household finally, fully at rest. Thank you for spending this quiet, unhurried time with Sleeping with Facts, drifting through the candlelit corridors and busy kitchens of the Gilded Age alongside the men and women who kept these great houses running. If your eyes have already closed and your breathing has slowed, then this journey has done exactly what it set out to do, and there is nothing more you need to remember from tonight. We will be here again next time, with another slow, gentle story waiting quietly for you whenever you are ready to rest. Sleep well, and thank you for letting these old, quiet hallways carry you gently into your own night's rest.